My name's Adam McLaughlin, and this is the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. Practical ideas to help your church build trust in your community. Welcome to the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast, where we help you build trust in your community. Today is episode 17. That means you can get your show notes at churchmarketingideas.com/017. I'm looking forward to my conversation today with Ted Vaughn. We're going to talk about leading creative teams and having healthy creative teams and how that creates a standard for the experiences that we create. And we go off in a few different rabbit trails. It's a really great conversation. I'm sure you're going to love it. And hey, if you love the conversation, then why don't you tag us on Twitter or Instagram at CMI Podcast, Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. Just follow us there. Maybe take a screenshot of the podcast you're listening to today and tag us there and tag Ted. And we would just love to hear from you. We'd love to start the conversation and get to know what you're enjoying about the podcast and what you'd like to learn in the future right here on the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. Well, I'm looking forward to this conversation with Ted Vaughn. Ted has over 25 years leadership experience in church and nonprofit organizations. He's a partner with Historic Agency, specializing in brand strategy, organizational health, and creative sprint solutions. In addition to Historic Agency, Ted is a partner with brandboards.com, an asset management and sharing tool for brands of all sizes. And after this message from our sponsor, my conversation with Ted Vaughn.
Hey friend, Ryan Wakefield here from Church Marketing University. And here's what I know about you. I know that you got into ministry because you love to see lives transformed. You love it when people get to hear the gospel, when they commit their lives to following Jesus, and it transforms everything about their life, about their family, about their neighborhood, about their community. That's why we got into ministry. And here's the good and the bad news, is in our society today, connecting with people has never been easier, but it's also never been harder. Easier because we've got all these tools to connect and to reach into our communities. Harder because there's very few people out there that actually teach us how to use these tools the right way and in a way that's super effective with reaching in, starting relationships, and being able to share the gospel. So if you're listening to the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast, you're in good hands, but I also want to let you know about a boot camp, what we call the Church Marketing Boot Camp, that you can get free access to. It's your starting point for reaching into your community. We're going to take what we found is the most effective tools that growing churches are using and show your church how to use them step by step to reach into your community. You can get access to this free church marketing bootcamp by going to churchmarketingideas.com/CMU for Church Marketing University. churchmarketingideas.com/CMU. And let's get started.
Yeah. Hey, Ted, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, which I know it is, with Historic Agency. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now with Historic Agency.
We started Historic 4 or 5 years ago. I don't remember. It's one of those stories where I saw a need and was working with a lot of churches and nonprofits in more kind of strategy or organizational health contexts. And often when the organization was healthy or clear, the obvious gaps around communications, marketing, brand, logo became more evident. And I, naively thought in the beginning, oh man, I know some great designers, some great web people. I'll just connect the dots and project manage it. And then, after doing 2 of those, you quickly realize, well, that's a nightmare. I don't want to do that anymore forever again, because good Lord, the amount of detail and project management and communication and expectation management.
Right.
So I knew people who were really good at that. And I was like, listen, guys, how about we just bootstrap this thing? And the creative director, Jeremy, was like, I've always wanted to start something called Historic. It's just a killer name. In a Christian context, it has the whole his story, which is
right.
A little silly, but it works for some. And so we did. We launched it. And, 5 years later, We've got 11 staff and some great kind of flagship clients like Purpose Driven Church and Rooted Network and some great kind of Catholic meet evangelical brands we're working with. We've really pivoted to be less about church and more about parachurch, because we find parachurch understand the need for us and are willing to pay for it, whereas often churches it's just hard enough to get them to open the books to a conversation around communications, right, much less invest in it. So no offense to you churches out there, we love you. We would love to work with you all the time, but it's a really hard business model to sustain. So we're doing a lot of work with brands like Evangelical Christian Credit Union and others, where it's really about helping them serve that market well. But we all come out of the church, believe in the church, love the church, and continue to be a part of the church.
Yeah, and I love that your viewpoint is so diverse, as having worked with churches, but also working with other Christian organizations or parachurch ministries. And so one of the things that we get to chat about today is how to build healthy creative teams. And I know that's a little bit of a joke, and unfortunately it's been in the water at the last few times we've been at conferences, or I've been through the Facebook group. And kind of the conversation is, I'm burnt out, I'm at the end of my rope, what else can I do? I don't have much time, or I don't have enough time, or I've just been handed the kids ministry as well, or whatever that looks like. So tell me, from a starting point, how could we define or describe what kind of benchmark could we set so we understand that we're at a place where our communications team is healthy?
Boy, the question of metric or benchmark is a great one. Health is often one of those things that's difficult to measure. Although in our bodies, it's not. We have benchmarks that we look at and go, oh, I know what health is based on heart rate or cholesterol or whatever. But often in teams, we don't know how to measure health. And I think, frankly, that is still a bit of a holy grail question for organizations. What does health look like? What I have found in creative teams especially is getting them to a place of health, right? Getting the soil healthy so that the soil produces above ground things that are cool and creative and work and right. That requires unique ingredients, if you will, or unique processes that help that soil be healthy. And if you're asking the question, what's the benchmark? In my opinion, the benchmark is this: a creative team that does great work that they're proud of, that serves the mission they're a part of in a sustainable way, which means they don't burn out, and in a way that is reproducing other artists or multiplicative, or so it's not just, I'm Picasso, I do great art my way, I hope you like it, if not, screw you. It's also not, I'm just Kinko's here to do stuff that you need, but I frankly could care less if you like it. I certainly don't. Right? That's not healthy. So I think those four things to me would be indicators of health. And then figuring out how to measure them is a different question. But are we doing good work? Because if the work sucks, well, game over. Is the work great and helping the mission? Because often in churches we see, killer creative work that actually doesn't help the brand or the mission do anything that it needs to do.
Right.
But man, that was super great. And then number 3, is it being done in a sustainable way, which to me is all about not burning out. You have people, there's not a ton of turnover. Some turnover is right and good. I think sometimes this whole low turnover thing is overrated. But people aren't burning out and leaving because they're completely wiped, frustrated, tired, done. And then the 4th thing would be, and a part of their energy and time is raising up, building up, duplicating themselves, whether that's through contractors, paid staff, or volunteers. I don't know if that gets at the question, but
yeah. I know it wasn't, a clear-cut answer like what is a healthy blood pressure, right? But at the same time, there's definitely indications or things we can move towards that we can say, yes, when I'm doing X, then that is creating health in me and my team and in my organization.
Well, and I think it goes back to the leadership. I don't think creatives typically know how to think about those things or measure those things. They don't have time to do that. It's not their job. And that is why in any creative setting, whether it's an agency or a church, you have to have leadership ensuring that these things are taking place. You know, my last full-time staff role was at a large church in San Diego called The Rock. And Miles McPherson, it's a very urban, creative, multi-site church. When I was there, we went through a whirlwind of change, massive change. Like went multi-site, built a television program. And I had on my team marketing, communications, Sunday worship, all of the production pieces that supported Sunday worship, in addition to college, post-college. It was a pretty big team. And at one point, I remember Miles, the senior pastor, asking me and kind of passing. He goes, "What do you do?" You know, I'm the chief creative officer. I'm on the executive team, right? And Miles is like, "What do you do?" And he's like, I'm like, I kind of looked at him like, you know, and he was like, "Well, you know, are you a designer? Are you a video guy? Are you a worship leader? Are you an audio? Like, what do you do?" I was like, "Well, I've dabbled in all of that." But, you know, frankly, every single person on my team is way better than I've ever been in my best years in their thing. Like, I'll never be as good as they could be or are now. And I was like, but none of them can outlead me. At the end of the day, I am outpacing them in leadership by a long shot. And that's what they need me to do. You get great product and great work, right? Because I keep the soil healthy. And, you know, and he kind of, oh, I'm so sorry. So sorry. I sucked apparently my phone and my computer are one now.
It's all good.
But yeah, so Miles,
you were leading that team.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I think Miles coming out of pro football, for him, leadership was more about like, listen, I need you to be an expert at your thing. So I'm going to hire you to do this niche thing really well. And leaders don't typically do that. They're much more of a generalist. And, but I think creatives need that. They need not a generalist per se, but somebody whose primary job is leading them, not being the best version of whatever it is they do.
Sure. So you talked about the size of team that you led and the diversity of the people on that team. And then also when we talked about health, you talked about creating things and creating in a way that lines up with your church's brand strategy. So I think that leaders often have an idea about what they want their church brand strategy to be, but they're not really great at communicating that with the people who are actually doing the creation. So in what kind of ways can we communicate what our brand strategy is in a way that translates through all the different pieces that get out there and represent our church?
Such a great question. I think brand is the most neglected conversation in the church today. And I think it does hurt creative teams because it doesn't give them the appropriate parameters to do the work they need to do. It also doesn't help their comm teams know where they should be setting things up for the larger organization versus a local campus. At Historic, we believe brand has 4 key dimensions: culture, product or service, experience, and identity, right? Identity is the obvious one. Experience is how you feel. Product is what you do, your environments. If you're a church, it's your curriculum, your environments, your services. And then culture is your people and really your leaders and their clarity and their health. I find if you as an organization or a church, especially since we're focusing on churches primarily, right, Adam, is that kind of your primary emphasis? Yeah. So that's my background too. So I'll talk about church. If you as a church can figure out how to articulate the dimensions of your culture in a way that is intentional, clear, differentiate it, right? Don't just say like Jesus and authenticity, because it's not helpful.
Right.
I mean, it's helpful, but there's more. If there's a way to communicate who you are in a way that provides not only clarity, but now can scale and cascade down the organization and give everybody awareness, it doesn't render the squishiness gone. There's always going to be squishiness, especially in creativity.
Right.
But if you can develop parameters that become fence posts or guardrails or riverbanks for your larger brand, you now really help mitigate the chance that a creative project or leader is going to go completely outside the parameters, because you've so clearly helped communicate what your brand is about. And that has to be more than style guide. That can't just be, we like saturated images that are of real people, no stock photo. Like, that's all great and really important. I think you should do that, but that's one dimension. I want to know what your brand aspires to feel like. I want to know what your services aspire to be. What's your value prop? And what do you want your leaders to be like? And what is your mission? And what do you want to see happen? That is all part of brand. And if you can figure out how to articulate that and cascade it, man, you will really help creatives do better work.
So I want to jump on one of those ideas because it's kind of my soapbox. And
Okay.
That is when a church picks up or assumes or takes on the core values of a larger church. And they think if we just follow those values and if we just do the things that they do and if we just be who they are, then we're going to see the same results that they see. And my proposition would be that actually hurts them because they're not being themselves. They're trying to be somebody else. So dig into that a little bit for me.
Well, I'll take your soapbox and I'll up it 2 inches. This is, if there is a soapbox, man, I'm on it with you. Where do I begin? So I could tell 3 stories around this right now with clients. One story is a client in I don't want to reveal too many details because then I'll get a phone call saying, "You son of a." But they are in an area of Florida that is very post-Christian, pluralistic, very kind of barely any seekers. It's much more cynics and skeptics. But they, being kind of an Assemblies of God type church, right, their playbook comes right out of the Southeast. So they're looking like, hey, what's Passion doing? What's happening at these hot churches all over Atlanta? Let's just emulate that, copy their social media, right? The way that they talk about Bible verses. So essentially what you have in the Southeast, no offense to churches in the Southeast, are brands that are communicating to Christians in ways that feel sexier, hipper, or cooler, because ultimately that entire audience, even those who are skeptics, understand Christianity enough to engage with it. They might be cynical about it or even skeptical, but they can at least engage with it. Not in this church's region. So if their playbook is to emulate and copy what's happening in the Southeast, when their audience is a completely different audience, and they're wondering why they're having all these problems, right? So they're hiring us to help them rethink their comm strategy in light of their audience, which is exactly right. You want to be who you are, but you have to translate or contextualize who you are to the audience that you most want to reach. And what's great for them is they actually know their audience. They want to reach those who don't know the gospel. They're a missions-based organization that exists, or I should say they're a membership-based organization that exists primarily for their non-members. Well, that's great clarity. They just need to do it better. Another story is a church that spent $75,000 with a different agency, getting a rad logo, great pictures, all sorts of amazing website, digital stuff. They helped them get values that were essentially kind of like copying Passion values, because everybody loves Passion, right, in Atlanta. And there's a billion other examples. But so this church, they call us because they're like, we did that about 18 months ago and things have never been worse. And we're like, what help us understand what's going on. So I do what I do, come in, do the assessment, the audit. And what do you think I find, right? I on the website, I'm like, this is amazing. I cannot wait to experience this church because it's going to be bitching. because the identity is like slamming.
Right.
I show up, and what do you think the experience is like, or the service, or the culture? Not even close to what this $75,000 thing is that they got.
Right.
So it's like you have problems because you're making a bold, awesome promise and no other part of your brand's delivering on it. Right? It's like, you're selling the iPhone and then you're shipping them a StarTAC flip phone. And they're like, but wait, it doesn't, So the last thing I'll say is I think, to your point, to get very specific, at the top of the strategic funnel of any organization is what I call meta-narrative. Meta-narrative are those statements that are broad, far-reaching, compelling, but important. Just because they're broad and high level doesn't mean they're not important. The question is, what do they serve to do? They shouldn't serve to be marketing, right? You should not have your church's meta-narrative or vision statement be more Jesus everywhere, or I don't know, whatever it is, right? That's a bumper sticker that helps no one. Maybe. I mean, it might be, it's cool, but what you need is something that truly expresses the unique mission that you're called to be on. And I believe the values that not only hold you accountable, but differentiate you from other organizations like yours, especially in the region. So if your meta-narrative doesn't differentiate you, but it just expresses some sort of corporate concept that everybody else has, you're not helping yourself. You're certainly not helping those who are looking at you for the first time. And you're probably not shaping culture very well because you have stuff that is just kind of like boring or assumed. You need language that is, I think, helpful, true, sticky, but not 3 words. A sentence, a statement, something that helps differentiate you, give you direction, shape culture, and that really is you, aligned with you. So all of that to say, if you don't have that, you should figure out how to develop that.
So tell me some of the symptoms of realizing that a church or an organization doesn't have that. Because I think sometimes churches hit a blind spot where they don't realize how much they don't realize. And so what kind of symptoms point to the thought that, we should really bring in somebody and help us clarify these things, and these are the reasons why?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will need to send you some diagrams that help unpack this.
Sure.
But to me, the symptom that I see the most often, if I was on a whiteboard, I would draw a funnel. And at the top of the funnel, we already talked about your meta-narrative, right? The broad statements that are super wide and important, compelling, but they're not going to answer questions like, should our small group model include Beth Moore or not, right? And then you go to the bottom of the funnel and you've got all the week-to-week programs, decisions, programs, stuff. Most churches have so much stuff at the bottom of that funnel. It's in the funnel, it's out of the funnel, it's way out of the funnel. And it's like they have all these things. And typically the pain point I hear the most frequently that points to the lack of this or middle of the funnel, which is strategy. The pain point is we have so much stuff we're doing down here. We have to prune or align or, God forbid, add something down here, one of these X's, and we have no clue what to prune, what to align, what to add. We just know and we don't know the answer because, and some staff may know, they're like, prune that. But then another staff person's like, no, my wife's in that. She loves it. So how do you navigate the decisions around pruning, adding, aligning all your stuff if you have no concept of who you are or what your strategy is for the next 36 or 12 months?
Yeah, it's a big thing to bite off. And I think that it can seem overwhelming. And at the same time, it's so necessary if we're going to reach our community and build trust in our community that we're clear about who we are. We can't we got the Church of the Highlands values, and we've got North Point's mission statement, and we've got Saddleback's vision statement, and here we go. And what is the first step? Uh, there's so much to bite off if you realize that this could be a concern at your church. What is the first step to moving forward down this path?
Well, is the first step assuming that leadership have recognized the gap? Because often the first step is helping them make sense of the pain they're feeling. Because most organizations feel pain. Most churches are feeling pain, and it's often the pain of disappointed congregants, lack of assimilation or retention of new people, or it is a staff culture that's broken, or there's all sorts of symptoms that I think point back to this. I think often step one is listen, my eyes roll at the thought of consultants just as much as anyone else's do. But I do think the challenge for most churches is they're in the weeds of themselves because they're in this sausage grinder of 52 Sundays a year. Christmas and Easter are extra work. You don't get those off. Even Thanksgiving, somebody comes up with the idea of pie night, and we should do a service on Thanksgiving Eve, right? So it's like you never get a break. And I think that results in self-deluded leaders who don't really get data or perspective because they're lost in the weeds of the deliverables. So all the pain and issues they feel, they just live with it until it becomes a crisis, right? It's like living as a functional alcoholic until you drive off a cliff, and then you kind of got to deal with it. I think if a church could figure out how to, at times, bring in outside eyes to have a healthy conversation with staff, or just attend worship, or just do some poking and prodding under the hood, it's really helpful because they help you connect dots. So I think at minimum, some kind of outside eyes assessment is really healthy and helpful to do, especially if it lets you not just secret shop the service, right, but actually meet with leadership and ask some questions about their experience. But the combination of the secret shopper experience with what the staff are saying with an expert's eyes, man, it can really help connect dots for you or lead to breakthrough. So I think if there's a first step, it's that, because you won't be able to see it. It's like it's like needing counseling, but going, no, I'll figure it out. I'll just kind of look inside myself and come up with all my problems. Good luck.
Right. So once we have the clarity in place, obviously this is a big key to creating healthy teams in our church, right? Because the clarity gives us a direction so we know we're all heading in the right direction. It helps us realize that we can delegate decisions and make decisions, and the clarity is the filter that people can make the decisions through. But also there are times in leadership where giving away too much of that delegation can kind of feel like you're letting somebody do their own thing, or maybe it doesn't line up, or the what ifs start to become part of the conversation. What if they post something on Facebook on behalf of the church that doesn't reflect us well, or becomes a PR nightmare? Or what if, the worship leader gets up and says something dumb, right? To different degrees and different, variations.
No doubt.
How do you create a trust? How do you communicate and create the trust to delegate? Like, what are the benchmarks to know that, yes, I'm delegating and I'm confident in the decisions that are going to be made?
Boy, it's such a big question. I keep going back to, when I work with creative teams or communications teams, I often will draw the Venn diagram of three circles overlapping. One circle is strategy, one circle are structures, one circle systems. Strategy is, do you as a comm team know what this church believes it's on mission to do? What's more important than something else? What's less important? Like, is there clarity from the executive level being passed down to you? Because if there's not, the danger zone strategically is the comm director is now forced to make those decisions just by nature of what they communicate more profoundly or louder than something else. because, if there's not a team saying, listen, these are the 3 priorities, your job, comm director, is to help advance these things, make these work. Most churches say, well, comm director, this month there's about 49 things and they're all important. So just shout everything to everybody as loudly as possible through every channel, and hopefully it'll work. And any good comm director is not going to do that. They're going to be
Right.
prioritized. They're just going to do it on their own. They're going to be like, well, I think these are the most important things, so I'm going to put these here and do this and do this and do this, and then other people get disappointed. So I think number one, I think one way to really ensure delegation and healthy empowerment of comm directors and creatives, make sure the organization knows internally what its priorities are and are not, which is often a big problem, right? We don't quite know what we're on mission to do. And if we do, we don't quite know what strategically is actually going to move the needle the furthest. So we just keep doing a lot of stuff and hoping something works. And everybody thinks their thing's the most important thing. So,
Right.
Your comm director really is the hub of that. And if you don't give them clarity, they're going to either tell you what they think it should be, or they're just going to say everything to everybody super loud, and it's not going to help. So number one, strategy. I think strategic clarity about who you are, what's most important, that is crucial for empowerment, delegation, and trust. Then you move to structure. Structure would be people. Strategy, main thing. Structure, do we have the right people in the right seats doing the right job? And I think often we don't empower because we don't quite hire well. I think it's really important to know, for instance, when do you need to have a full-time staff person, and when do you need to have a contractor? When do you need an agency? When do you need volunteers? And getting that right, oftentimes we hire specialists, and what we should be hiring are leaders who can grow in their specialized skill, or who can work with an agency for areas of specialization that they're not good at. But what they're really good at is communication, leading, managing, raising up volunteers, right? Maybe you can't design like Hillsongs, but that's okay. Somebody who can contract or whatever. And so I think systems are strategy, structure, and then finally systems. I often find that there is a total breakdown in comm teams or churches with systems, meaning they don't use Basecamp or Asana or Monday or Trello or OmniFocus or whatever it is. They have no tool to help manage projects. And I would take that a step further. It's one thing for a comm team to have tools to manage. It's another thing to help communicate to the client what is happening. I think often the biggest breakdowns I find aren't necessarily with the teams, but they're with the communication or trust between the comm team or creative team and the senior pastor or the executive team or ministry directors. And that's often not a structure problem or even a strategy problem. They just don't have a good system for following up and sharing files and communicating. I mean, that's why our agency, even though it's somewhat funny, we still use Basecamp version 2 and 3 because it works. It's
Right.
just simple, idiot-proof, external-facing. A 79-year-old elder recently joined Basecamp with a church I'm working with, and she was like, "Oh, this is incredible! It was super easy. I can't barely figure out my email, but they figured out Basecamp." So I think that may be a long way of not answering the question, but Adam, I think strategy, structure, and systems being healthy allow empowerment and delegation, and it ensures better delivery in creativity and comm.
So talk to me a little bit about, or talk to the communications person who feels like they have been delegated the job of being Kinko's, and they are being told what and how to do it, even though they're going and learning that a certain idea or certain strategy might not be the best. So I'll give you an example. I was working with a communications person, and they were given the instruction to put this on Facebook, and in the status, I want you to say, we need everybody to like, comment, and share this photo. But we know based on Facebook algorithm, if you put that in the algorithm, it actually really decreases the reach because Facebook wants people to do that on their own, not because you told them to. So talk to the comms person who is currently in a robotic or Kinko's position where they're being told what to do and expected to execute on it. And how can they create the trust, and how can they take the initiative to establish a trust with their leaders that allows them to implement some of their own ideas?
It really, for me, it goes back to the fundamentals of good leadership. So I'm going to put on kind of my executive coaching hat and talk about, I think the best tool I've found for comm directors is this tool called inquiry and advocacy, or inquiry versus advocacy. And, so in the executive coaching world, that's a really fancy way of saying this: ask better questions. Or how about this? Just ask questions, even though you know the answer. I think often what I find in creative and comm teams, very talented people, very specialized, talented people, nobody else on staff understands what they do, how they do it, or much less understands algorithms enough to know how to give good advice around social media. They're just not going to do that.
Right.
And sometimes creatives or comm directors, right, I find they've got this resentment because they actually expect that these people are going to know that, or do that, or know their job, or know how to pay them appropriately, or know how to help them, or know how to advocate for them. And nobody does. I used to tell my team at The Rock, listen, guys and gals, I don't know your world. So if you need something, you've got to make it abundantly clear to me what you need, why you need it, and how I can help you get it. Because I just won't wake up in the morning and go, oh, this team really should have an extra $5,000 for this because of their tool. And I don't know. So I think in order to advocate for yourself and build influence, you have to realize nobody understands my world better than me. Therefore, I have to lead up all the time. The best way to lead up is to ask questions. So hey, whoever it is, executive pastor, I saw this thing about posting this thing on Facebook. Hey, are you aware of some of the changes with the algorithms? Because I'm a little concerned it might not work. Oh, I'm not aware of that. Tell me more. Well, blah, blah, blah. Right. So you get there not by saying, I can't believe you did that. This is the thing. And now the person feels defensive or just beat down. Instead, you just ask questions like, hey, were you aware? And it can't come off as patronizing, but it needs to come off as a genuine question, even though you know the answer is going to be no, because the guy's an idiot or not.
Right.
You internally hold back from that opinion or that wrong assumption, and you go, I need to build influence. I'm going to build a bridge. I want to ultimately get them to where I am. I'm going to ask questions that help lead them to the conclusion I'm already at. And the beauty of that, most of the time you build influence. Sometimes you realize you're wrong because they'll say, oh, I did know that. And I also know this. And you're like, oh, crap, I didn't know that. Right? So I think sometimes asking questions, not sometimes, all the time, asking questions always will build trust and influence. It'll often help you see that you're actually missing something or wrong. So in my opinion, comm directors, creative directors, if we can figure out how to ask better questions that seek to understand and or lead people to conclusions, way better. It's harder. It takes more time. But man, that is a really great art for young leaders to learn.
Okay, so last question, and I promise this one's a bit of a doozy. So
Okay.
We talked about turnover earlier in the conversation, and unfortunately, at some point in time, some leaders in communications realize that the only way to be healthy is I'm not going to be able to work here any longer. And so can you talk to that communications person a little bit about how to have a healthy exit?
Sure. I think the first step of a healthy exit is actually self-evaluating why the exit is occurring. And if you, number one, are actually released by God or are just pissed off. And number two, if you're just chasing greener grass, which frankly, I have found there are different shades of green, but rarely is the grass somehow this miraculously better Garden of Eden. It usually just comes with its own snakes and traps and problems, right? So it's often, we think we're trading up, we're just doing a lateral move. So I find often that the first step to a healthy departure is that you should be departing. And I think the biggest test to that is, am I released? And if I'm released, how do I know? By what am I evaluating that through? Now it could be the senior pastors actually saying to you, I really feel like you're done here. That's a really helpful indicator.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of I think barometers that can kind of help you determine that. But I think it's really helpful not just to ask, am I mad? Am I frustrated? Am I angry? Are they offering me a job? Throughout your career, that both of those will happen. You will be often pissed, and you will often have a new opportunity that just is dangling out there. Those can't be, there has to be, I think, a sense of, is what God's called me to do here done? Have I learned what I'm supposed to learn? Is it time to go? So that's number one. I think number two is contingent on the culture you're in. Some church cultures are full of false loyalty, which means we actually need you to be, we need you to pretend that you're more in, because to not do that is to create a problem, and now people will look at you and doubt you. And so in those types of cultures, false harmony, false loyalty, you really can't share honestly that you're struggling or looking. It's just not safe. So I think in those cultures, your road out is different than in a place where the culture's made it abundantly clear that you can share honestly your experience. So if you're in a culture that is more about false loyalty or harmony, you got to kind of pretend it's more about how you look and behave than how you're feeling. I think in those places, you really have to go with an interview process and an exploration process that is somewhat guarded. But at some point, you have to run the risk of sharing and what will happen. In other words, what you can't do is go all the way to the point of now just giving 2 weeks and bailing. I think at some point you have to leave well, even that culture. And that means if I'm interviewing you for an opportunity at my church, I'm going to require you at some point to have a hard conversation with your supervisor. And that will come at a great risk if the culture you're in isn't healthy. That I think that if you are released and God's leading you someplace new, you carry that load. You carry that weight and you do that. Don't blame the bad culture for you now not doing what you're supposed to do. Right. But proceed with caution. You have to be very careful. And I respect that. The ideal is that you're in a culture where maybe not the larger church culture, but maybe your team or your supervisor or your department, you have a culture, excuse me, where you can say, I don't know what's next, but I'm feeling like my time here is done. Here's why. And then the people around you can go, yeah, I think that's right. Yes, this happened at the Rock. My first year at the Rock, we had this amazing leader who was a great video guy, but not right for the future. And we had hard conversations within my first year, and he saw it, felt it, owned it. He left well, and we had a Christmas party, and it was also kind of a goodbye to him party. And my first year at the Rock, and he's gone on to be this incredible pastor leader at a huge church in San Diego, and he's crushing it. But to me, I put that as a huge mark of honor, a huge a win in my career, that I helped somebody transition well. Were they fired? No. I mean, they didn't see it coming, but they certainly realized and would say, you know what? Ted walked a process with me. He didn't make this some sort of weird event. So I don't know if that's answering the question, but I think you have to take responsibility for leaving well, no matter the culture, but the road out is going to look different based on the culture of the organization you're in.
Yeah, I think that helps answer the question. In most cases, it's not an easy decision and it's not an easy process to work out, but there's some definite ways we can make it happen smoothly. Ted, I just want to thank you so much for the conversation today and for bringing your wisdom to the podcast. If somebody wants to connect with you or they want to find out more about Historic, how can they do that?
Yeah, I'm actually right in the process now of getting my own website set up to be more about thought leadership and content. When I first started, I just didn't know what I was doing and set it up to be something stupid. So we're pivoting it right now, and I'll be doing a podcast and be doing all sorts of great things in the future in 2020. TedVaughn.com is there, but it's just a weird holding pattern. I think I would encourage people to follow me on Twitter or social. I also think our website, historicagency.com, just as it sounds, historicagency.com. Last thing I'll kind of selfishly promote is brand boards. We created a product. It's a subscription product, super cheap. To manage and share assets, meaning logo, identity, all sorts of other aspects. For instance, imagine you're a large church and you want to share creative ideas or the Christmas brand. You could have a page devoted to that, a page devoted to Easter, a page devoted. So brand boards, brandboards.com, killer resource. Check it out.
So tell me a little bit about how brand boards is just a little bit different than, a Dropbox folder or file sharing.
Yeah, great question. So it's web based. So one URL, you go to that URL, it's password protected. So only people with the password can get in. And then once I'm in, I can now not only find whatever version of the logo I need and download it elegantly and effortlessly, but there's a little AI built in which will let you go, gosh, I'm a volunteer. I don't know what I need, but I'm doing a 4x6 postcard in black and white. It'll walk you through prompts and then lead you to say, you need this. And then you can download it and you can share it effortlessly. So it's like one-stop shopping for all your brand assets. And you can also protect certain things are only downloadable, certain other things are not. So they're there, you can see them, but you have to ask to get them.
Gotcha.
So it really is, for a small church or a small brand, a elegant, effortless way to make assets available and share those painlessly. Otherwise, you're getting the email, could you give me that one logo lockup? And you have to then go, wait, where is that? And
Right. Okay. Brandboards.com, BRANDBOARDS.com. Historic Agency as well, TedVaughn.com, and track down Ted on Twitter. Also, if you're going to check out the show notes, Ted's got some illustrations of some of the funnels that he was talking about and some of the other pieces of the puzzle. All that stuff's going to be in the show notes with some examples of what we talked about, and all of the links will be right there. Ted, thank you so much for hanging out today. I really appreciate your time.
Dude, thanks. I love the conversation. We're kindred spirits. I'd do it anytime, Adam. Take care. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Hey friend, Ryan Wakefield here from Church Marketing University. And here's what I know about you. I know that you got into ministry because you love to see lives transformed. You love it when people get to hear the gospel, when they commit their lives to following Jesus, and it transforms everything about their life, about their family, about their neighborhood, about their community. That's why we got into ministry. And here's the good and the bad news, is in our society today, connecting with people has never been easier, but it's also never been harder. Easier because we've got all these tools to connect and to reach into our communities. Harder because there's very few people out there that actually teach us how to use these tools the right way, and in a way that's super effective with reaching in, starting relationships, and being able to share the gospel. So if you're listening to the Church Marketing Ideas podcast, you're in good hands. But I also want to let you know about a boot camp, what we call the Church Marketing Boot Camp, that you can get free access to. It's your starting point for reaching into your community. We're going to take what we found is the most effective tools that growing churches are using and show your church how to use them step by step to reach into your community. You can get access to this free church marketing bootcamp by going to churchmarketingideas.com/CMU for Church Marketing University. churchmarketingideas.com/CMU. And let's get started.